Okay, it's Saturday the 5th, and we're still in Hobart, but we are flying back to France. Finally got permission to go, so we're out of here on next Saturday. Actually, it's Sunday here now, so the 11th we're back. We'll be in Le Sable d'Olonne on the 12th, or France, Paris 12th, and then France on the 13th. So what's happening? Guy is carrying on towards Cape Horn, which is he's right, and there's a question down here about that as well. So he's on his way, and the weather looks pretty good. There's the big blow coming, which you may have seen the video graphic from Rob that sent us. This big, a really physically large, intense low pressure system that's going to come across and interact with Kirsten and Abelish. We've not given them the fine detail because we're still, over 2 days away. But we have suggested they might want to consider staying above 49 south, which will be explained as we get closer. It's an area which has the least wind direction change, which might make the sea state a little bit easier for them when it comes through. But they're going to get hit, and it's going to be quite strong, completely manageable. It's what they're geared up for. It's just that we've had such a good ride, touch wood, over the last number of months that this thing's like, oh, it's a storm. But, that's what you get in the Southern Ocean. So, yes, it's a storm, but that's what the boats are prepared for and the sailors and stuff. So it's not a sort of like a moment. It's just that's what you get down there. And there'll be more and more of them as the weeks go by. So this is just a big one. They can't avoid it. They're going to have to interact with it. And let's see what happens. Simon's making pretty good progress. His wife, Claire, is on her way down. And Lutz and Seb have set everything up to help him with pilotage coming through. So that's kind of cool. And all's pretty well. Goog is a little bit miffed when he realised he went into the zone. Sent us a really long message on tweet, which was just a dash. He said, "Oh, sorry, Goog, you've got 4.5 hours to do," and he just sent back a dash. So he's having a bit of fun. Anyway, that's the GGR. So first question from Joanne: What's your favourite part of the race? The planning, interviews at the gates, or the finish? You wear hat of many things during the race. Actually, I'm sharing that hat, I should say. It was a distinct consideration. Lutz and Seb are playing a big role with all the interviews and bits and pieces, and we've got a good team. Anetra's out there doing all our Instagram, and Rob's doing all the video stuff. Oh, actually, there will be onboard videos coming. We've had a few delays on a couple of issues, and we've got a lot of the race left yet, so there's still a couple of videos from Cape Town to show, and then there's the videos that we onboard videos that we picked up from the guys and girls coming here into Hobart. So look forward to that. So which is the best part? I really think it's the film drops when you see the entrance again for the first time and you feel their emotion and the ups and downs of being in the GGR, but it becomes very real, and we feed off that as well. When the team, like when Ada here, Jane, whatever, when they're gone, when they sail away again, we talk about it a lot between ourselves because it's like a window, and you really get to sense what's going on. It might not be pretty, but it's going on. The GGR has an impact on everyone. So I think these interactions, as much as the entrants hate them, I've got to say they love them too. They'll tell you all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, it is an interaction. Yes, it's hard to get here and all that sort of stuff, but they're really an amazing window for everyone. So I think the best part for me is actually the film drops. So from Ted, are the remaining sailors all carrying storm drogues? Yes and no. They all have some sort of a storm plan, but they might not necessarily have a drogue. You heard Guy, for instance, it was ropes and chains. I think a couple of entrants had the series drogue, that everyone talks about. It's just a dragging thing in the water. It's effective, it works, it's good. You got to know how to use it. Some of them have got other dragging devices. You can use your anchor and chain and blah, blah, blah. So they all have a plan, but not all of them have got drogues because some of them don't like the idea of going slow. They'd rather keep moving. So at the end of the GGR, we will do a survey with all the entrants and list everything they've got and what their reaction was, and those who used it and those who didn't. So that'll cover off on everything on the boat, not just drogues. But if you had to ask me, I'm not sure. Abelish has never made a big deal about his drogue situation. I'm not sure what he's got. I can probably find out, but it's a mixed bag. And not everyone is a believer of having a drogue. In fact, there's quite a theory on the fleet that it's better to keep moving. So hopefully that makes sense. And the reason for that is that every situation is different. It's not just sticking a drogue out. You've got to think about how you set the boat up and what you do. But yes, a drogue is a good thing. Hi Don, love the format of the GGR. I wouldn't change a thing. No, neither would I. But I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about race and rule changes for 26 following Ontario, Canada? The big one that we've developed out of this one is to have a high bilge alarm relevant to Tapio's situation. That's one thing. Second one is we'll probably require that they will have to have a sealed iPhone on board that they can use as a readout for their AIS transponder. They have to have a transponder, but that AIS information is to go to ships. They can't read it. They set it up with their iPhone, leave it there and leave the iPhone home. But it was proven that to have the iPhone on board when you're trying to rendezvous with a life raft with an AIS beacon on board, you can actually use that as a closing method. So I think that's a good idea. So that'll happen. Apart from that, there's very few things that are going to change. Even people have started a discussion about life rafts. Where should it be? In the cockpit, here, there, everywhere. We don't get involved with restricting a sailor to do anything they want if they believe that gives them a better chance of survival or being safe. What we do is we evolve a set of safety equipment rules and so on, and they've got to pass the safety, and after that they can do what they want. And if they want to store their life raft down below or in the cockpit or wherever, it's entirely up to them. Their neck is the one that's on the line, not us. So we don't want to be too prescriptive. And I think that's the net sum total at the moment: a high bilge alarm and having access to an iPhone with that can read the AOS transponder, and I think that's about it. So there won't be a lot of changes. It changes the number of boats. We've already filled up with rustlers, by the way. We've got 7 rustlers that are locked in. So if you want to enter the GGR with a rustler now, you're going to have to go on a wait list. We discussed that before anyway. So there's a strong interest in the GGR. The tougher it gets, the more people are interested in putting themselves up against it. There may be some other little things, but nothing comes to mind at the moment. We believe strongly that the concept and the ethos of the GGR is very important, and we'll protect it. We look forward to seeing what happens in 26. Touch wood. Hi Don team, this is from John. How does sheet to tiller steering work? Okay, the first thing I want to say is the best thing you could do to get a real graphic in description is just go to YouTube, right, and actually put in the search on YouTube, sheet to tiller steering. There's some actually quite good videos there that go for about 6 minutes. There's another one I've seen that's 15 minutes, and it'll actually give you the graphic demonstration. But in simple terms, obviously the tiller, if you're steering with a tiller, that'll steer the boat with a rudder. Okay, so imagine my arm is now the tiller. Okay, and if I put a bit of, and this is the tiller steering the boat, the bow's up there. If I put a bit of bungee cord here to keep pulling the tiller that way, right, the tiller's going to go like that, and when it goes like that, the boat's going to go like that. Okay, now if I put a counteracting force here, get a bit of rope, and it pulls it to there like that, and that rope happens to go, this is a simplistic explanation, through a pulley and to a sail up the front, right, which is sheeted in, okay, and the wind is blowing on that sheet, so it's holding across here, and pulling the tiller against the shock cord. If the boat then gets knocked by a wave, and the wind is blowing on so the head's up the front there, gets knocked by a wave, and the boat starts to fall away in this direction, there'll be more sail exposed to the wind, and the sail will stretch, and it'll pull this rope and tiller this way. And as it pulls it that way, the boat is then going to head up a little bit into the wind, and it'll vary the shock cord pressure, and it'll steer it back on course again. Now, that's about as good an explanation as I can give you, and it's not totally correct, to show how you have pressure on a sail when the wind is pushing on the sail. If you bear away, there's less pressure or more pressure, and it pulls the rope. It's very hard to explain graphically, but the other way I can try and explain it is that really you've got to understand the principle of balance on the sails on the boat too. If you just tie the tiller amidships, so it's not moving, you balance the sail. If the boat is across here, you've got a head sail and a mainsail. And then there's the mast, okay? And here's the boat. Now, if you imagine the wind is blowing this way and you've got the same sail, my hand is that size sail, the mainsail is this sail, and if the wind is blowing on both of them evenly, then the boat is balanced and it'll steer like that, right? But if I decrease the size of the mainsail like that, and I've got this one here, there's less pressure at the back of the boat and more at the front. So the front is going to push back this way, and the back's going to go that way. So the boat's going to steer across to starboard because there's more pressure on the front of the boat than the back of the boat. And conversely, you can go the other way. If I decrease that one and increase that one, this is the mainsail at the back of the boat. Well, now I've got pressure on the back of the boat, so the back of the boat's coming this way. There's less on the front, so the front of the boat's going to go around that way. So you balance the sail, and it will alter the course of the boat, and yet the rudder hasn't moved. Okay, and so if you understand those balance principles, what you're doing is if you now have your sheets going through pulleys to the tiller, you can actually, and then you have a shock cord introduced, which is giving you a one part of pressure on one side of the tiller, which is a new force, right? You can actually drive the boat to a point where when you, depending on which sheet is coming to the tiller, the pressure of that will either increase or decrease and stretch against the shock cord. So you've introduced a third level of energy and response, okay? And so you can do all that when the pressures on the sails are the same. And so when the boat goes off course, you naturally get increase and decrease pressure on one sail or the other. And when you do that, if the sheet is going to the tiller, that new input allows the tiller to move because of the shock cord, okay? It's very not easy to explain verbally, but I would say to you, just the other thing you can do also, just Google it. Just Google sheet to tiller on Google, and you'll see various websites that come up, and it'll give you the complicated process or a simple process of sheet to tiller, because there's various ways to do it as well. You can do it crossover blocks, and it can be simplistic or it can get quite sophisticated, and it does work. The problem is that once you get it all set up and it's going perfect, a wave will come along and knock the boat, and the whole thing goes to mud. And you turn inside out and back front and go again. So it depends on so many variables when you're sailing in a sea state and how fast you want to go and what the course is. And it's a lot easier to steer with sheet to tiller or balancing the sails when it's on the beam or forward of the beam. As soon as you get behind, you get very little input, and you get interaction of the wind running down the boat, which doesn't fairly split the loads between front and back to steer the boat. It's running down the centre line. It gets very complicated, and that was the challenge for Simon. So I don't know whether any of that makes sense, but always a bit interesting. Do you know why Ian on Puffin seems reluctant to sail to windward? I know exactly why, because he's a gentleman, and gentlemen don't sail to windward. Does he particularly have deep cambered sails? Maybe the boat's too heavily loaded, unable to find enough power, make progress into the wind. We saw this the same in the Biscay. The Tradewind 35 is a nice boat. In fact, Guy's got my boat. That's Sagarmatha is the boat that I bought to do the GGR in 2018, and I sold it to another guy, and then blah, blah, and now Guy's ended up with it. They're a beautiful boat. They're not a high-performance windward boat, but they sail very well. And if you look at the GGR and you look at Ian's boat in particular, he's set it up. It's not a light version of the boat. He's set it up bulletproof. It's total Bristol fashion set for any ocean anywhere in the world. And I've stated publicly any number of times that I'd be happy to get on that boat and take it anywhere in the world. It's that well prepared. But it is heavy and it's got a lot of windage and blah, blah. But he just doesn't want to stay hard on. He's looking after the boat, and slamming to windward and going to windward is not good for the boat or the skipper. Sometimes you have to do it. If he had to sail to windward, I'm sure he could sail a lot better than he could. But when you're ocean sailing, you don't usually worry about going to windward unless it's the last 100 miles of a course or whatever. When you're outside there, you're better off sailing to the weather and keep the boat moving. But what I will say, and I've said this publicly often, sometimes Ian prefers comfort and security over maintaining the run line or actually sailing to the mark. In other words, if I'm sailing and you've got to go to there, from here to there, and the wind's coming from the other way, you could try and go a little bit closer to the mark and sort of this way, not hard to windward, but at least try and stay there. But Ian will regularly just back off and just go with the flow, And so he is actually sailing a lot longer distance than some of the others. And that's just the way he likes to sail. And it certainly looks after the boat, and it looks after him. So it's not a criticism in any way, it's just how he's sailing. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. So he's doing okay, but yes, some others are holding the line more often and holding the course and adjusting the sails in terms of a route and hanging on for the ride just to get to where you want to go. Whereas Ian will maybe a little bit more relaxed sometimes. I think that's probably what you're coming to. He's got good sails, he's got everything there, but it's a long way around the world, and you've got to get to the finish. So that's his game plan. Hi, I'm okay if you don't want to answer this question. Isn't directly connected to the GGR. I'd like to hear your opinion on Clarice Creamer. situation. It's hard for me as a spectator to know. Okay. Clarice, you may have seen some of it on Facebook. It's gone nuts. It's a hot potato subject, so I've got to be careful what I talk about. But yeah, it's an interesting subject for sure. And I've got to state publicly, I support women in sailing. I've sponsored women in sailing. And even in the OGR, which is our fully crewed race around the world, we actually insist that you have to have a mixed gender crew. And I'll give you an example how delicate a subject this is. I was severely criticised for actually insisting to put a clause in the notice of race that insisted you have to have a mixed gender crew. Some of the women came back and said, how dare you do that? We're all sailors. We don't need anyone telling us and making special exemption for us to get in the race. You know, you should just scrap that rule. You know, it's ridiculous. Just make it sailors and the women will get on. Okay. Plenty of others said, wow, that's cool. At least we're going to get some women on board because we're trying to support the whole issue. Anyway, Clarice was a hot 650 mini sailor, class 650 mini sailor, did the mini transat. I watched the last one that she did and she did an amazing job. I think she came second, but it was an amazing story. Really hot sailor, really cool, okay? Banque Populaire in France is a huge supporter and sponsor of yachting. They've got their Ultim, they've got the Mochas, they do all sorts of stuff, they're massive, okay? And so they decided in the last Vendée Globe they wanted a woman entrant. They approached her, asked her if she wanted to join their team as a female woman skipper. She did the last Vendée Globe. She was a great character and she did an incredible job. She was the fastest of all the women. She had huge support, of course. She was the skipper of Banque Populaire with their huge infrastructure and logistics, ran everything, and she sailed the boat really well. I think she was 12th in the Vendée Globe. Anyway, she was sort of set and they're trying to carry on and do the next Vendée Globe in 24. And she decided she wanted to have a baby. She's a woman, that's what women do. And they built that into the program. And so she had the baby. And then the sponsor, and remember, this is professional elite sport where they want to support women and they made an objective decision to do that. But it's professional. They get paid good money, okay? They get sometimes the more money, those with the biggest budget are going to have the best results. But anyway, she had the baby and then the sponsor, who is responsible for all their bits and pieces, made the decision to cease their partnership because in the Vendée Globe rules, there's a lot of competition to actually get into the event, and if they've got over 40 boats, then that's by qualification, and you have to get the most miles and all that sort of stuff. And because Clarice had the baby, which they worked in, and the program, it wasn't working out. It meant there was a risk potentially that she couldn't actually get qualification to do the next Vendée Globe. That was a risk for the sponsor, so the sponsor decided, no, it's not working now, we need to put another skipper in there to give us a better chance to get it. Very complicated, all right? And so they ceased their partnership, and now everyone's getting involved. Huge, sort of controversy about, women in sport and mothers in sport and professional sport, and now I've seen reports that it's just gone crazy. The French government's involved. The ministers are involved. You've got to get Clarice back. And I just saw a report that apparently, I don't know whether this is correct or not, it was on social media, but apparently Banque Pop now may be taking legal action against the Vendée Globe to get them to redo their rules and blah, blah, blah. And the Vendée Globe, they're the organisers. They just said, hey, this is the rules and regulations for sailors, not women sailors, not men sailors, but sailors. So... and they're holding the line, so we're not changing the rules for anyone. They're all sailors. We welcome all the women, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a huge controversy. And at the end of the day, it's about equality and fairness. And people have forgotten the fact it's about sailors. And this is professional sailors, and there's so many subjects there. It's amazing to watch what's going on. So I don't even want to give an opinion, but at the end of the day, that's a professional sport. And yes, they're supporting women, and yes, women are mothers, and yes, women make choices, men sailors make choices. Everyone's got choices, and from that, there's an underlying theme, and this is where it gets I'll give you my personal opinion on this. I've been chasing sponsors for 40 years. I have very little success, but I never expect anything from a sponsor in terms of I have no rights to get a sponsor. If I want to get a sponsor, I have to earn it. And if a sponsor doesn't like me for whatever reason, because I've got no hair, or I've got too big a belly, or I'm not a good enough sailor, they can get rid of me, for whatever reason. And it's an amazing subject to watch what's going on. But, it's very delicate subjects. And I'm quite happy to have a section in the OGR that says you must have a mixed gender crew. because I think women should have a chance and they should get out there and do things. But there's one thing that I always say: women are not men. No one will ever tell me that the women can do some things that a man can do, and no one can ever tell me a man's going to be able to have a baby, because they can't, because men are different than the women. So anyway, that's probably enough on the subject before I get into trouble. But yeah, it's amazing to watch. But anyway, it's a sad situation all round, and there's no winners with it. But I really feel for Clarice. I feel for Bank Pop. I feel for the Vendée Globe. I feel for the politicians and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's incredible, you know. So and certainly, one thing's for sure, you know, Bank Pop could have just promoted and kept on with her, and told the story of a woman who's a mother doing the Vendée Globe. They could have gone that way, but they decided not to. They wanted to go for performance, and now they've ended up in a big pot of mess. So it's very sad for everyone. But anyway, okay. What's happening to Captain Goog? He went across the line, and he didn't know he went across the line. Obviously, it cost him 4.5 hours, and that's bad luck. So he's okay. You know, Goog's a very complex character. He's doing a great job with his boat, and I hope he's still having a great time. And 4.5 hours is not the end of the world, but nonetheless, that's the notice of race, and that's how we treat it. And yeah, he'll serve that time in a box in the Atlantic. As he goes up the Atlantic, we'll notify him it's about to come up the next day or something. And what happens is, at a particular point of time, we give him a time and say, right, at 1200 Zulu the next day, that's your line. It's an east-west line, and he has to go immediately stay south of that line for 4.5 hours. And when the 4.5 hours are up, he can go back and cross the line. So it's very simple. Has a woman sailor won a major solo around the world race? Nothing stands out for me. It was an interesting question, and if Kirsten did okay, that'd be a first, and I think if Abelish did okay, that'll be a first as well. It'll be the first Indian as well. So there could be some more, but Good could win yet. You don't know. Touch wood, even Ian. It's a long way to the finish, so let's wait and see. For us lawn sailors, can you give us a brief description of the difference between the style of boats in 22 GGR? We've got Ketch, Cutter, Cape George, and so on. Well, okay, so you've got one mast and you've got a sloop. If you've got a staysail in there, it's a cutter. If you've got a ketch, you've got two masts, and we've only got one ketch. Then all of these boats are full-bodied, long-keel boats, outboard rudder, or a rudder connected to the trailing edge of the keel, I should say. Minimum displacement, 6,200 kilos. They're all quite heavy boats, solid boats. And we did that on purpose. They're all fiberglass, being refitted and so on. Super duper strong hulls, not meant to sink, touch wood. It was unbelievable with Tapio. The idea being that you should never have to get into a life raft, and that was one of our concepts, besides the fact that it's very similar to the boats that sailed in 1968, like Sue Haley. And when you get into boats like the Cape George 36, it's long parallel waterlines, very clever design, researched a lot by Kirsten, and they went and found one, you know, and it's proven to be very fast in certain conditions. So that's kind of interesting. And each of the boats has features that are different than the other. And you can look at the statistics on the GGR website of all the different types of boats, and say, you know, compare them, sail area displacements and so on. You can also go to sailboat data. You can put if you just go any name and design of a boat and then prefix it by sailboat data, it's a great site. You can go there and look at all the statistics and you can compare all the different boats. So, and if you want to know what's going to be approved in 26, there's room for new designs. The concepts are all on the notice of race on the GGR website that you can download, what the parameters are, and you'll see. Every day, nearly every day I get someone asking about a boat for the GGR 26, to prove whether it would fit or not. Not every day, maybe three or four times a week. We get asked about different boats. So we don't actually approve a boat until someone enters with one, but we discuss it and then so on, and if someone enters with one, then it becomes an approved design. But we're allowing 5 or so new designs for 26, so there's no limit really. If you find a boat, you can go for it. Okay, John, could the sailors have included scuba gear in their boats if they could spend more time underwater clearing barnacles? Yes, they would, and they could. There's no restriction on that, but I doubt anyone ever would because it's very heavy. You only get one fill, all that sort of stuff. So, Omri, how did Kirsten manage to sail a lot quicker than Abelish to take the lead again? Is it only the barnacles coming off, or is there more to do with that? Well, the barnacles helped, but certainly Abelish was sailing slow for a few days. He was recovering from from his back sort of pains and so on, so he wasn't trying to keep up. He was also keeping the boat comfortable, so he went off course a little bit, you know, to keep the boat comfortable. And then Kirsten's sailing well, you know, she sails hard. So it's a combination. It's the same with any sailing. And then you get different, the further the split, you get different weather and you've got different inputs for your boat speed. So it's a complicated argument, but that's yacht racing. You know, you win some, you lose some. But Kirsten's got a hot boat and she's sailing really well. And Avalish is on the hunt now, so they're back in the game. So that's good to watch. Jill Ward, sorry for these stupid questions. Could clarify for a non-sailor, please. You mentioned Saturday briefing, Simon. Well, this is Guy. Guy may continue without a life raft. Is this a usual scenario? Guy lost his life raft in the storm. We assumed that, we didn't confirm, but we assumed he'll probably come back to Hobart to pick up another life raft. And he's not. And I know why he's not, because if he came back to get a life raft, his trip would be over. And I'll explain that like this, that if Guy wanted to come back to Hobart now to pick up a life raft, he probably wouldn't arrive until late this week. Which would be about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about the 10th or something, 11th. He could have asked us to organise him a life raft, so he'd turn around in a day, but he wouldn't be away again until the middle of February, and then probably, and then because you've got to clear customs in and all that sort of stuff, and then clear out again, and blah blah, and then he's leaving here sort of like mid-Feb, which is really late in the season. And so there's a high probability he may then feel it's a bit reckless to carry on and maybe not happen. So instead of that, even though we haven't spoken to him, he hasn't sent us any messages or anything like that, I'm not sure why, but anyway, we're guessing this. He's clearly heading southeast. He's heading down south. And he's clearly headed for Cape Horn without a life raft. And that is a whole subject in itself. If he was a GGR entrant, it's potentially, we discussed this, if he was a GGR entrant, we may actually even have been forced to request him to come and get a life raft. I'm not sure. We don't have to make that decision. But personally, a personal mariner at sea in a yacht doesn't have to have a life raft. You know, it's personal choice. It was very unusual even that Tapio had to get a life raft, but he did. But many people carry life rafts as a contingency for the ultimate disaster. I've carried a life raft everywhere I've ever been in the boat, never used it, touch wood. So if Guy makes a decision to carry on without one, which I think he is doing, it's entirely his choice. It only affects him. And I wouldn't suggest it's reckless because it's his life, and he knows the capability of his boat and what he's doing and so on. So it's an interesting conversation. So I'm not passing an opinion or comment. I'm just explaining what's happening there. So am I correct that he's carrying on in Chichester class? He has been in Chichester class since Cape Town. Now that he hasn't made the gate, once he passes the longitude of Hobart, we carry that as a safety thing. Once he passes the longitude of Hobart, then he's out of the event. You'll see him moved off the tracker, and he's now officially a non-entrant. He's doing his own thing. You can follow him on his website. They've got their own safety watch with all their crew, and everything's organised, so he's quite cool. Then it says, then as I thought it was considered too risky by the race to make this journey, hence the Hobart Gate deadline. Why would he do this? Because he wants to run his own adventure, you know, and that's the beauty of the ocean. It's free. And so in his opinion, he's a very competent sailor. He's got a great boat. He feels in good condition, and it's entirely his right to go and sail anyway. Vito Dumas went round the world and through the Southern Ocean in the middle of winter. There's any number of people that still do it in the winter. But for the event of GGR, we have a serious risk mitigation process, and we want to be seen to be responsible, and we answer to our partners like the Saab Delone and McIntyre Adventure and the authorities around the world, and we want to be fair and reasonable. And when you're running an organised event, you need guidelines and you need to be responsible, and we perceive the risk to be for entrance in an event too high, and that's why we shut the gate on August the 31st. So it's no reflection on Guy, it's just what we do for our event. Okay, so is it because he's now he's in a different bracket where he noticed of race insurance constraints? Well, I'm not sure what insurance Guy has, but for us it doesn't matter. We have liability insurance for sure, and it's based on our notice of race, and they're the rules of our race, and we manage those very closely. Finally, from a safety perspective, can he get aid if required in ways the remaining GGR contestants can, thus enabling him to proceed Cape Horn without a raft? Well, He can still call on all the international rescue coordination centres around the world. He has an EPIRB on board. He has all the usual safety equipment. The only thing he's missing is his life raft and the PLB and VHF radio in the life raft. So he has all these other facilities. He has sat phones. He has tracking systems and so on. So he's as safe as he deems he needs to be, and it's clear he's making his way towards Cape Horn, and that's his right as an individual mariner on the ocean. And good luck, guy. Okay. I've read an article that Abolish has received some medical info. Is this allowed? Do they call me? Do they call you, Don? Then ask to speak to a doctor. Okay. Standard procedure is we have an organisation called MSOS who run our 24-hour telemedicine service. So if anyone on board a GGR boat has a problem, they can immediately pick up their satellite phone and call them 24/7 and discuss what's going on. They manage the first aid kit on board. They know everything's happening. They've got all the medical records of every entrant. So everything's instant, 24-hour medical services for all the entrants. In the case of Abolish, it was a little bit different because it's a past injury when he had all his back operations and so on. So what happened is Abolish rang, expressed his concern that he's got all these issues. I won't go into the issues. And he needed to speak to his wife to coordinate with two different medical partners on two different subjects in India. We granted that, and in the end, I don't think he needed to actually speak to his wife because he was able to connect, and he did speak to his own two different types of physicians to get advice and opinions there. They're also on notice then to report back to us as the organiser. We get that. That's then also passed to MSOS to keep them in the loop, and they advise certain things as well, and that was passed to Abolish as well. So there were actually 3 individual medical facilities involved, and that's standard procedure. They're allowed to do that under the race. So it was all managed very well, and he's looking good. He's quite happy at the moment. So all good. Cadge, hi Don. Do you know what the legend Jean-Luc Vandenheed is doing these days? Damn good old man. He's having a great time. I think he's sort of retired. He's enjoying his active retirement in Les Sables d'Olonne, does a huge amount of speaking engagements. He's the best ambassador for the GGR, and he's also, we've got a lot of French entrants in the Ocean Globe race. He's a big ambassador. He's helping us a lot in the Ocean Globe race as well. We're great mates. He's a huge supporter of everything that Jane and I do, which is fantastic. And he's having a good time, I can assure you. And he's still sailing, and that's about all I should say at the moment. But yes, he's enjoying life at the moment, as he well deserves to do. And he has a big following too. You'll see a lot of stuff in France about him all the time. Okay. And he's following the GGR very closely. He watches it every day on the tracker, and we chat every now and then and stuff like that. So too, I should say, there's Robin Knox-Johnson. We're in regular contact. When all this is happening, Robin's in the background. He's our patron, big supporter. He lives and breathes the GGR. He's watching everything. He was really miffed when Simon had to downgrade to Chichester because he was really hanging out. No British has won an around the world race since he did back in '69, so he was a bit disappointed about that. But yeah, Robin's following everything closely, there's some interesting stuff going on in the background. So, right, this is a good one. Ooh, I like this question. So, according to Katie Strickland's online article in Yachting Monthly, Abolish has no secret sail on board. Fancy that. Wow. What was then the secret weapon that I mentioned after Abolish left Hobart? Ooh, let me see. Dare I say, as I've said many times, I am not able to disclose Abolish's secret sail, okay? I can assure you I have seen photographs, and all will be revealed maybe at the end of the race. But think about who Abolish is. If he was asked by a journalist, is there a secret sail? Of course not. No, stupid idea. Just wait one. Let's wait till the finish, touch wood. That's all I can say. It's actually, but you're getting to know the character of Abolish. We have a lot of laughs, it's very, he's quite a character, and of course he's going to say there's no secret sail. Think about it. Anyway, that's cool. So I was an expedition leader for a long time on a ship, and it was amazing. I could just do wild things because everyone believed everything I said because I was the expedition leader. So I could say anything and they'd believe me. Anyway, so yes, believe Abolish. He's got no secret sail. That's fine. Okay. So is Guy still in the race? I thought he'd retired after January 31st. He's still involved in the GGR right now. The 31st was when the gate closed, but we don't just kick him out when they're at sea. The guideline is once he crosses the longitude of Hobart, then we'll retire him from the event. So he's still very much in the event, and if we get any tweaks, we'll repost them, but we haven't heard anything from him for a while. So anyway. We're nearly done. Okay, my dad spent 2 seasons in Antarctica with the Navy back in the 60s. He told me many stories. He told me about rogue waves from the bridge. What's your experience? Oh, boy. Rogue waves, it's an interesting term. But statistically and scientifically, yes, there are rogue waves, and they are up to 3 times the size of the normal wave sets when they happen. They're not very common, and I've, in the past we've done posts about it, and this, that, and the other. There's stuff online if you Google it. But statistically, they've shown it with wave buoys. There was a classic one a year or so ago off Canada in the middle of a big storm, when there's massive waves, 12, 15 metres, 18 metres, and all of a sudden, this buoy just went nuts. And it just shot up to like massive, like, I don't know, 30 metres or something, which was a recording of a rogue wave. So they don't happen very often. But you get big waves that mixed in with the whole thing, and they come from what I refer to as 2 things. One is when you've got a crossover section, you've got one wave coming this way and another wave coming that way, where the arms cross over there. At that point right there, they really, hump up. You can see lots of graphic explanations and pictures and descriptions of that online. But the other one people don't know about and may not understand, but you see very clearly when you're in the Southern Ocean, and I was always fascinated, it's the holes. There's all these holes everywhere, okay? And by that, just as you have this wave pattern where they come over like this and roll along, just there on the crossover, and just here sometimes, and just there, you have this really deep hole, okay? And I used to spend hours and hours down below when I did my BOC, just watching through the book. I said, oh, there's another one. And you could see a big hole over there. And then you see another one over there sometime. You just see these holes. And what the holes do, they accentuate everything else, because if your boat happens to be there where you've got this wave crossover, and you happen to be set up and it's got this hole here and you're down the bottom, it adds another 30% on top of everything else, if you happen to be in the hole at the same time. And that's one of the tricky bits. That's one of the ones that I was always, because I got knocked down 7 times in the passage from Cape Town to Australia, and I got knocked down a couple of times and one 360-degree rollover in the next leg from Sydney around to Punta del Este in Uruguay. So there's lots of funny wave things that happen, and you'll hear me refer every so often in the weather alerts and when I'm giving weather about how we're just happy that, okay, it's getting big, but at least the wind's in the same direction and the seas are getting organised. When you get these wind shifts in the low pressure system, that's when you get a change in weather in the sea state and the types of waves you're getting, and that's when you have to work hard again and wait until the whole thing settles down a bit, because you want to set the boat up so you don't have to be in the cockpit or whatever, and you can relax a bit. So yeah, there's a lot of fun things out there in the Southern Ocean, but that's the nature of the game. Anyway, that's it. I think we've done them all, and we'll maybe see you again next week. I didn't think there'd be many questions, but as soon as I put it up, they all popped up. So we'll keep it rolling. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. You can turn off now.